Florentina in the City of Possibilities. Part 1. The Briefcase and the Big Dream. The City of Possibilities was beautiful, provided you looked at it from a distance. Up close, it was a dizzying kaleidoscope of pastel-colored towers, towering Gothic libraries, and winding cobblestone streets lined with ancient chimneys. Pink, yellow, and turquoise facades stood beneath a sky so crisp it looked painted. The architecture looked like a grand fairy tale, but the people walking the streets looked completely exhausted. Florentina stood on the main boulevard, her two dark braids practically twitching with optimism. She was 18 now, finally legal, finally ready to conquer the adult world. In her hand, she clutched a massive professional gray leather briefcase. It was currently filled with 3 copies of her resume, a half-eaten sandwich, and a lot of hope. The briefcase was so big it almost hit her knees when she walked, making her look like a tiny child playing dress-up as a corporate CEO. "This is it," she chirped to a passing street pigeon. The bird blinked at her with supreme indifference and continued pecking at a discarded wrapper. "Today I find my true calling, and nothing can stop me." She didn't know that the City of Possibilities mostly offered the possibility of getting a massive headache. Her first destination was a glittering corporate skyscraper made entirely of blue glass that mirrored the sky. It was the headquarters of the biggest company in town. She walked through the revolving doors, her heart beating with the naive joy of a total novice. The lobby was humongous. It echoed with the sound of clicking heels and ringing phones. People in sharp black suits marched back and forth like ants in a glass farm. Nobody smiled, nobody looked up, and everybody looked like they were late for a very important, very boring meeting. Florentina adjusted her big leather briefcase, took a deep breath of the air-conditioned atmosphere, and marched forward with a massive grin. Part 2. The Gateway of Superiority. The reception desk of Megacorp Enterprises was a monolithic block of white marble that looked like a tombstone for creativity. Behind it sat a receptionist whose eyebrows were plucked into a permanent expression of deep, soul-crushing judgment. She was typing on a golden computer with long neon pink acrylic nails that clicked like tiny tap shoes. "Hello. I am here to apply for the junior internship position," Florentina announced, slamming her oversized briefcase onto the pristine marble desk. The sheer force rattled the receptionist's designer pen holder and spilled a few paper clips. The woman slowly lowered her glasses, looking at Florentina's braids, then at her boots, and finally at her face. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked, her voice dripping with ice and extreme boredom. "No, but the sign outside says, 'Your future starts here.'" Florentina offered a beaming 100-watt smile. The receptionist sighed, a sound that carried the weight of 1,000 rejected souls. "The sign is marketing, child. Your future actually starts in the waiting line behind 30 people with master's degrees and 5 years of unpaid experience." She didn't even look at Florentina's beautifully printed resume. She simply tossed it into a wire basket labeled, "To be looked at eventually." Florentina stood there for a moment, waiting for a kind word or a direction to the elevator. The receptionist immediately turned her back and started typing fiercely on her computer, ignoring her completely. Florentina blinked, her first taste of corporate arrogance hitting her like a cold splash of water. But instead of crying, she just laughed it off. "Maybe she is just having a bad hair day," Florentina thought, marching back out into the sun. "If they don't want my energy, someone else will." Part 3. The Magical Entry-Level Trap. Her next stop was an eco-friendly boutique bakery that boasted an inclusive and caring workspace on its colorful social media page. The scent of cinnamon, fresh vanilla, and melted sugar filled the air, making Florentina's stomach rumble with hunger. The owner, a man named Bartholomew who wore a knitted beanie in the middle of August, smiled warmly from behind a counter filled with expensive pastries. "Ah, fresh soul," Bartholomew said, wiping his hands on an apron. "We need an assistant. Someone to handle baking, cleaning, accounting, social media, customer service, and occasionally wrestling the delivery van's broken transmission. It's a classic entry-level role for a young person." "Wonderful," Florentina said, her eyes glittering with excitement. I am very energetic and I can learn all of that in 1 week. Perfect. The hours are 4 a.m. to 8 p.m., 6 days a week. We offer great benefits, like a 5% discount on day-old croissants, and the immense joy of being part of our alternative business family. Florentina recalculated the math in her head, realizing she would have no time to sleep. And the pay. Bartholomew looked deeply offended, as if she had insulted his ancestors. Pay? My dear, we pay in experience and exposure. Money is so capitalist and uncool. We provide a vibe. Can you put a price tag on a good vibe? Florentina stared at his expensive designer apron, his luxury leather shoes, and his premium smartphone resting on the counter. She realized that a good vibe could not buy the ice cream she desperately craved. It could not pay for rent or food in this expensive city. I think my vibe requires actual currency to survive, she said, politely grabbing her briefcase and backing out the door while Bartholomew muttered about the lack of work ethic in the younger generation. Part 4. The Cloud of Overwork. By noon, the beautiful pastel streets felt like a maze designed to exhaust her body and spirit. Florentina found herself outside a local call center. The building looked like a gray concrete block that had given up on life and beauty entirely. Inside, the air was thick with the sound of desperate typing, ringing bells, and the collective sighs of overworked employees squeezed into tiny desks. A supervisor with massive dark circles under his eyes handed her a heavy headset. Trial run, he barked, spit flying from his mouth. Sell extended warranties for mechanical pencils to people who don't own pencils. If you take a bathroom break longer than 42 seconds, our system automatically docks your pay. Florentina sat at a cramped cubicle. To her left, a man was quietly weeping into his lukewarm coffee. To her right, a woman was drinking her fourth energy drink, her eyes bloodshot and twitching. Go on call, the supervisor yelled from across the room, tracking her with a literal silver stopwatch. Florentina dialed the first number. Hello. Would you like to protect your writing instruments from accidental damage? Stop wasting my time, you parasite. The voice on the other end screamed before slamming the phone down so hard it echoed in her ear. The supervisor glared at her with pure malice. You lacked enthusiasm. Smile through the phone, Florentina. Smile until your jaws ache. You must sweat and suffer for the company if you want to succeed. Florentina realized this wasn't a job. It was a psychological endurance test designed to turn human beings into broken robots. She looked at the crying man, then at the angry supervisor. She quietly took off the headset, placed it neatly on the desk, and walked out while the supervisor shouted about her lack of corporate loyalty, dedication, and future prospects. Part 5. The Gathering of the Feathered Allies. Florentina collapsed onto a cold stone bench in the Grand Library Plaza. The beautiful clock towers of the city chimed 2 p.m., their bells ringing out across the rooftops. She felt exhausted, frustrated, and a little stung by the cruelty and complete indifference she had witnessed all morning. People passed her by, staring at their phones, completely unconcerned with the young girl trying to find her place in the world. Well, she muttered to herself, opening her giant briefcase and pulling out her homemade sandwich. The adult world is delightfully unhinged and slightly terrifying. A soft coo sounded near her feet. Then another. Within seconds, a dozen gray pigeons surrounded her bench, their little heads bobbing up and down. Leading them was a particularly plump, gray pigeon with an oddly intelligent glint in his eye and a missing toe. Let's call him Barnaby. Hungry guys. Florentina laughed, her sad mood melting away. She broke off a piece of bread and tossed it to them. At least someone appreciates my presence in this giant city. Barnaby took a big piece of bread, looked at her giant briefcase, and then looked directly into her eyes. He let out a sharp, commanding squawk that sounded almost like a trumpet. Suddenly, the air was filled with the thunderous beating of hundreds of wings. Pigeons from all corners of the city of possibilities began to descend upon the plaza. They covered the statues, the benches, and the ground, forming a massive swirling circle around Florentina. They weren't just looking for food. They seemed to be waiting for orders, nodding their heads in perfect unison, as if they understood her struggle against the corporate monsters. Part 6. The Toxic Crucible. Before Florentina could figure out why she was suddenly the queen of pigeons, her phone buzzed with a loud notification. An email invite. A luxury fashion boutique named Envy & Company wanted an immediate interview for a sales assistant. Florentina dusted the breadcrumbs off her skirt, said goodbye to her feathered friends, and hurried over to the fashion district. The boutique was a temple of minimalist malice, with white walls and overpriced clothes hanging like museum pieces. The manager, a tall, thin man named Julian clad in black silk, eyed her braids and her giant leather briefcase with open disgust. 2 other candidates were already sitting there. They were girls who looked like they survived entirely on iced water and judgmental thoughts, and they immediately glared at Florentina. "We only have one opening," Julian said smoothly, playing with a silver ring on his finger. "And frankly, we prefer candidates who don't look like they just stepped out of a children's book. But let's see who wants it more. Describe to me why your competitors fail miserably." The other 2 candidates immediately launched into a bitter, malicious tirade. They insulted each other's outfits, makeup, and resumes with terrifying cruelty and jealousy. Florentina stood between them, listening to the absolute venom in the room. Julian watched with a twisted, joyful smirk, enjoying the jealousy in spite of the girls fighting for a terrible salary. Florentina looked at the angry girls, then looked at Julian. She didn't get angry or sad. Instead, a bubble of pure laughter rose in her chest. It was so absurdly malicious that it transcended reality and became a comedy. She started to giggle, then laugh out loud, her voice echoing through the silent boutique. "What is so funny, you strange girl?" Julian snapped, his face turning red. "You all are working so hard to be completely miserable." Florentina laughed, picking up her heavy briefcase. "Keep your job. I like my soul right where it is, and it doesn't fit in your store." Part 7. The Pigeon Protest. As Florentina exited the boutique, Julian followed her out to the crowded sidewalk, shouting angrily, "You'll never work in this town. You're blacklisted by everyone. You're nothing but a silly child with ridiculous braids and no future." Barnaby the pigeon, who had been sitting on a nearby street lamp watching the whole scene, took this personally. He narrowed his eyes and let out the battle cry of his people. Within seconds, a literal cloud of pigeons darkened the sun above Envy & Company. With military precision and speed, the flock swooped down from the roofs. They didn't hurt anyone, but they unleashed a coordinated, devastating aerial assault of droppings directly onto Julian's expensive black silk suit and the immaculate glass front of the boutique. "My suit! My beautiful glass windows! Shoo! Get away!" Julian shrieked, waving his arms in panic and running back inside as 50 birds swirled around his head. Florentina stood on the sidewalk, laughing so hard she had to hold her stomach, tears coming to her eyes. The pigeons lined up on the roofs, cooing in triumphant harmony and shaking their feathers. They had her back. The city might be indifferent and cruel, but its wildest inhabitants were completely on her side. The corporate monsters had no power over the sky or the birds. Part 8. The Sweet Solace of Chocolate Chips. With the boutique defeated and her career prospects at an absolute zero, Florentina decided she had earned a much-needed break. She walked away from the fashion district and found a small, brightly colored cart with a yellow and white striped umbrella. The sign on the side read, "The Happy Scoop." The vendor, a kind old man with a large white mustache that looked exactly like a fluffy cloud, smiled warmly at her. "Rough day in the city of possibilities, young lady. You look like you carried that briefcase across the whole world." "The roughest day ever," Florentina admitted, placing her heavy gray briefcase on the cobblestones with a loud thud. "I met mean receptionists, bosses who want me to work for free, and people who live to be cruel to each other for an entry-level job. Ah, the standard modern job market." The old man nodded sagely, pulling out a clean ice cream cone. "Don't let them change that beautiful smile of yours. The world needs it. What can I get you to make things better?" "The biggest scoop of double chocolate chip ice cream you have, please," she said, counting her last few coins. As the old man scooped the dark chocolate ice cream, Florentina looked around the beautiful public square. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden, amber glow over the pastel buildings and making the windows sparkle. Despite all the exhaustion, hostility, and arrogance, she hadn't given up. She had laughed in the face of their malice and fought back with pure joy. She knew her value even if the corporate world did not. Part 9. The Golden Discovery. Florentina took her massive cone of ice cream and sat on the edge of an old, ornate stone fountain in the center of the square. The water cascaded down with a peaceful sound. She took a deep, blissful bite of the ice cream. The chocolate melted perfectly on her tongue, washing away the bitter taste of the corporate world. As she leaned back to enjoy the sunset, her heavy boot knocked against something hidden in the thick green ivy growing around the base of the stone fountain. It made a heavy metallic clinking sound that didn't sound like a normal rock. Curious, she leaned down, placing her ice cream carefully on the stone, and pushed the green leaves aside. Tucked deep into a hidden stone crevice was an old, heavy leather pouch tied tightly with a thick golden cord. It looked like it had been waiting there for a very long time. She pulled it out with both hands and untied the tight knot. Her eyes went completely wide, reflecting the golden light. The pouch was packed to the absolute brim with glittering ancient gold coins. Each one was heavy and stamped with the beautiful image of a soaring bird. There was enough wealth in this single pouch to buy 10 boutique stores, 3 bakeries, and an endless life supply of premium ice cream. Barnaby the pigeon landed quietly on the fountain's edge right next to her, giving a knowing low coo. He tapped his beak against the stone fountain, as if to say, "The city leaves its true treasure for those who don't let the world break them." This was the city's real gift, hidden from the greedy executives and given to the pure of heart. "Well," Florentina whispered, a huge, radiant smile spreading across her face as she looked at the treasure. "It looks like I just hired myself as the boss of my own life." Part 10. Freedom and New Beginnings. Florentina stood at the edge of the Grand Plaza, her gray briefcase in one hand, her heavy pouch of gold safely tucked away, and her melting ice cream in the other. She was completely free. She didn't need their underpaid internships, their toxic competitions, their rude receptionists, or their 4 a.m. shifts. She had conquered the city of possibilities on her own terms, with a little help from her loyal feathered friends. She took one last look at the beautiful, ridiculous city as the first evening stars appeared in the purple sky, knowing she would never have to compromise her joy or her smile for a paycheck again. It's incredibly hard to say goodbye to Florentina. Her bright eyes, her chaotic energy, her beautiful braids, and her unyielding laughter make you want to stay in her world just a little bit longer. Leaving her feels like a tiny ache in the heart, a sadness because the story is over. But we know she is going to be completely fine, living life on her own terms, a true victor over the absurd modern world. And as our journey with her ends, we close this chapter with the final note. This beautiful book is being created at this very moment in the Bulgarian language by its original author, who is breathing true life into Florentina's incredible universe. But for now, we say goodbye to this audio script, sending a huge thank you to the AI for its creative help in crafting this wild English adventure. Goodbye, Florentina, until we meet again.